Hello and welcome to Evening. I'm your host, Esraa Haidar. When war erupts, women are often the first to experience the harsh brutality that accompanies any form of conflict. Their psychological, reproductive, and overall well-being is often severely compromised, and the post-war effect of war on women is sometimes, if not always, life-changing. More to discuss the effect of war on women is Ms. Safa Al-Ali, the Communication and Media Advisor at Amal Association, a Lebanese NGO that promotes the social and economic well-being of women and underprivileged citizens. Also joining us from Lebanon is Mrs. Rita Shimali, a researcher and specialist in the field of women's rights. I'd like to welcome our guests, but before we begin, let's take a look at this report.
The nature of armed conflicts changed dramatically during the latter half of the 20th century, with casualties among civilians increasingly outnumbering those of military personnel. Women and girls became especially vulnerable in such conflicts, and they constitute close to 80% of internally displaced people and refugees worldwide. Modern warfare has had a devastating effect on the lives and dignity of women and girls, as well as on the health and educational services that are essential to family and community survival. Along with reproductive health complications, the adverse effect of conflict hit women and girls harder than it does their male counterparts, since deliberate gender-based violence and discrimination are rampant in these settings. As such, these gender-specific threats to women and girls compound the challenges of ensuring their protection. This has resulted in gaps in the design and delivery of assistance and protection, shortchanging the priority population of women in conflict and post-conflict situations. Essential services such as basic health care, including productive health care and counseling, are often disrupted or become inaccessible during conflict situations. This compounds health risks for all affected populations at a time when public health needs soar. Women and girls become the individual and systematic targets of sexual violence, specifically when rape and sexual assault are used as weapons of war. Despite these negative outcomes, women have acted as peace mediators in families and societies for generations and have proved instrumental in conflict prevention. The question that remains is how long will women have to sacrifice their rights for the well-being of others?
I'd like to welcome our guests once again. Mrs. Al-Ali, why is it that in armed conflict situations, we notice that these situations are not gender-friendly, or they're biased towards affecting women more than they are affecting men?
In war, especially, and in armed conflicts, women and men face these changes in a different way. It differs in reaching for the resources, and the difference that women. Their duties differ. They have to take care of the kids more, and they have just to take responsibility more in how to protecting their children. Yes.
So these situations where women are put into war, the effects that war has, besides the reproductive, the health, or maybe the sexual assaults that women might face in normal situations, do they increase during war situations?
Of course, such problems increase, and in addition to what you said, especially in armed conflicts, women their duties divert from being like a normal structure for household duties. They have to do more efforts. The decrease of male presence and population, there will be like a change and divert in
and the role structures in the family.
Yes, in everything, and there will be like more things that reallocation of funds that will be used in health and in protection, providing the needs for the family, to more to the defense of the country and other stuff. So there will be like
and this balance between the funds that are being provided to support women, which is why the resources available for them and the support that they get is much less, and this is why what you're suggesting is that they're affected more severely during wars.
Yes.
Mrs. Shimali, what are some of the major effects that are specific to women when it comes to wars? We know that wars affect human beings in general, of course, but what are some of the specific effects on women themselves?
On women during armed conflict and war, there are two major big effects. First, there is the big problem of violence, physical violence, that may be also sexual violence. Also, we have the psychological violence on women, and this is one of the main negative effects of armed conflicts and war. When we talk about sexual violence, and as we saw in the report you showed us, sexual violence is usually used to first as a weapon of war to clean ethnically what we saw, for example, in Serbia, in Africa, and in some countries. Rape has been used by both parties or sometimes by governments to demoralize communities, and especially populations and family and communities. It's not only rape that is used, but sometimes also girls and women specifically are pushed forward to sell themselves. They are forced into prostitution and any kind of other indecent well-being. So first, when we talk about sexual violence, this affects women specifically because they are targeted in armed conflict. And it's important also to note that because rape is used and sexual violence is used, this increases, and as a consequence, we have more what we call them diseases, sexually transmitted diseases like AIDS that touches women during war and armed conflict much more than men and children. This is one of the first negative effects of war or armed conflict, and this is what we're seeing right now in for example, Syria, for example, in some of the camps.
Mrs. Jamali, what about the reproductive health of women, especially those who are pregnant, and the maternal health of women? Does war also have negative effects on their reproductive health as well?
Yes, it's important. The question is very important. It's very, very, very important, and to notice that usually aid is given to women, for example, in refugee camps. But what organizations, international organizations, UN organizations, sometimes they miss some point is that mothers to be, nurturing mothers, have special needs and special care, especially related to their reproductive health and especially related to them as a woman. So sometimes health is for
compromised.
Aid is compromised, and they forgot the importance of being a woman during war and giving them some, for example, some basic necessities specialized for women. I can give you the example of war in 2006, the war against Lebanon, where IDPs were received, women IDPs were received by internally in other parts of Lebanon, but the communities discovered that, for example, the woman didn't like to be in the same camps and in the same room like with other men, and men especially that are not from the same family. Women needed some basic needs that are not usually given by aid provided by the government or by international organizations. This is very important during war.
Mrs. Al-Ali, why is it that organizations allocate funds in a way that does not truly support women during wars? Women are misplaced, or they're replaced and placed into certain camps, yet why is it that they don't receive the funds that should support them to have better lives during such difficult situations?
Actually, especially in such issues and such situations, the NGOs try to reallocate the funds for better needs like how to provide mostly food and other needs for women, and they miss that these women, they have the one main specific issues related to having their own rights. So when the society becomes like busy and
focusing on the war itself.
Yes, and on the war itself and the effects, and from one side they forget that these women have their rights, and thus this way they demolish their rights, or they just
it becomes a minor issue.
Yes, minor issue.
So what role do the countries of these where the war is taking place in taking care of its citizens and taking care of the woman? If we have Syrian refugees, what role does the Syrian government have? Or if we have refugees from other countries, does it become the responsibility of NGOs, or does it become the responsibility of the countries where the war is taking place, or does it become the responsibility of where they are being relocated?
It's a responsibility distributed on all of these sectors. I think that in such situations when there is a camp for refugees, it would be like something helpful for women if they generate a small community inside this community made of women, and like this women like become the a resource center for other NGOs or for the communities outside or for the societies, so they can collect the database about the women in the camp, about their needs, about their issues related in different topics and different subjects, and thus they can transmit the help, and as well they can highlight on the needs, on the specific needs these women.
So what you're suggesting is that in such camps and in such situations, women are marginalized and the support that is supposed to be given to them goes somewhere else.
Yes.
That women themselves should speak up, that women themselves should work as a community as a whole.
Yes, but they need someone from inside to speak, because if I'm a foreigner, I came to this camp, they won't feel free and like to speak to me. But maybe if I'm coordinating with someone inside the camp, a woman from their community, it will be like
so there needs to be a trust issue.
Yes.
There needs to be
between them, so they would speak to her and she will transmit the needs of women to the people outside.
Mrs. Shimali, we noticed that discrimination is also a very negative effect of wars on women. How do women refugees face discrimination when they are relocated or placed in places that are not their homes?
As your host just said, it's very, very important to create small communities and empower them inside the camps for them to be able to speak about what their needs are. I have told you the example of what happened with the refugees in Lebanon, in other parts of Lebanon. Women were able to talk to other women inside the schools where they were received, but also to women in this region. They asked them for special needs and basic needs that are related to women. It's very, very important during armed conflict. There is this help being given by women themselves. Girls, teenagers, all they help each other. Some classes are women create some classes for the children. Some women take children into care, while other women, for example, cook, or other women do other tasks. So usually there is this community that is recreated in the camps and in the refugees camps. But your question was very important. It's very, very what we should highlight is that everybody is responsible of the refugees. It's a country where they are hosted, but also their own government. It's important for the own government of any kind of party to keep the rights of each member, of each man and woman in their own country, to keep their rights. For example, the resolution 1325 given by the National Security, the UN in 2000 highlighted this point. Usually women lose their rights when they get back and after conflict.
This was my second question to you, Mrs. Shimali. What about this resolution? Who does it support? Why was it created? And could you please give us a little bit of details about it and how it could help refugee women?
Yes. In fact, 1325 was published and by the UN Security Council in 2000. Its aim is to help women during armed conflict and war. And the aim of this convention is for first to minimize the risk of any kind of disaster and war. It highlights the points where women are specifically targeted by armed conflict. It talks about sexual violence. It talks about the psychological trauma that is one of the consequences of armed conflict and war against women, the psychological trauma, the anguish, how this should be dealt with. It also talks about the children and the consequences on the family. You know, when I'm a woman living in a country where there is war, I fear, I have the stress, I have anguish, I'm afraid of those who are missing. This resolution speaks about all those things. But what is important is that we must empower women to understand this resolution and to put it into place and execute it. So each country and the governments of each country should raise awareness for this resolution and put it forward and help people implement it, especially NGOs. Sometimes NGOs doesn't know about this resolution and do not know how to implement it.
But Mrs. Shimari, does this resolution apply to all countries, or can countries come and ratify this law and say that we will not abide by it? We have our own laws to protect refugees, and this is how we're going to protect women.
Of course, what happens usually in international law, countries have the right, and they are sovereign countries, so they have the right to say, yes, we abide by this convention or not. But for the countries who abide by it, it's very, very important to implement it, as well as the Hyogo Convention. This is just a convention that makes it easier for us to understand what are the needs related to women in armed conflict. This resolution pinpoints out the aspects of the bad effects of war and conflict on women and girls and teenagers. I prefer not to forget that there are those teenagers that we forget sometimes. Those teenagers that drop schools just to help their mothers, take care of the household. Those teenagers that are usually early married because of the situation.
Because of the situation that they're in. Mrs. Al-Ali, what about education? And Mrs. Shimali just talked about girls dropping out of school just to go and work to support their families. How do wars affect the education of young girls and women worldwide?
Women have to abandon their schools, of course, and sometimes to leave their own countries and to migrate to some other places. There is a big gap here to fill the education part, and some women has to try to educate their own girls at the house, or maybe to find alternatives, yes, to teach them somewhere, or to send them to schools maybe, or centers, as we have here, like in Lebanon.
So there is a high probability that they will lose their education and maybe go to other forms of work, or maybe get skills training.
Of course.
In terms of learning how to, for example, create clothes,
creating crafts, or
creating crafts.
Yes.
So you've noticed that this is also a consequence of war and women.
Yes. If I have to mention something related to us about Enamel Association,
if it's possible,
maybe?
if we could talk about what your organization, what Amel is doing in supporting refugee women after the break. Please stay tuned. After the break, we'll be talking about how women should empower themselves and others in order to survive wars. Please stay tuned.
Around the world, outside the mainstream, anywhere, everywhere. A media of your land, of your creation. A new media in a new era. Will it take the lead in the future? I believe so. This is Underground.
Underground, when vague turns to clarity.
Welcome back. Mrs. Al-Ali, you were telling us before the break what Amel Association is doing for Syrian refugees specifically. So if you could tell us more about this project.
Okay, the project with the Syrian refugees is...
it's specifically for a woman.
Yes, specifically for women. We are working with... we have different community centers for Amel Association, where we teach the women about life skills education, how to create the handicrafts things, drama therapy activities. We provide them awareness raising sessions and workshops, training workshops about different topics.
What are these awareness sessions focusing on? Do they focus on peace building? Do they focus on
peace building, gender-based violence, sexual abuse, education itself, health, reproductive health?
And are you
subjects.
noticing that women are approaching these workshops enthusiastically, or do you feel that there's some kind of demotivation that prevents them from coming?
At the beginning, I have to say, like when women started to visit our centers, they came to our centers just to learn new skills, or to find a place where they can express themselves, because they are feeling like they are locked somewhere, especially after being migrated from their countries. And sometimes they live 4 or 5 families at the same place, so they find this like an escape or space for themselves to speak. During our awareness sessions, most of the subjects, or at the beginning, most of the women coming from rural backgrounds, they came, they want to communicate with us, they want to share their ideas, and if we try to speak about the gender-based violence or sexual abuse, they would stand and treat you with repulsion.
So they're not very open.
Refusal, yes.
They're not open to talk about what they're going through in the camps.
Yes.
And how do you support them in speaking up? How do you support them if women in the beginning are not able to come to you, and once they do come to you, they are being a little bit shy or incapable of saying what they're going through? How do you support them in changing that?
We try to empower these women in how they can support their families from the economical side, and how they can support themselves through the drama therapy activities, how they can speak up about themselves. So they start shy, yes, but then they start to become more open and to speak about their issues. Sometimes they need psychological help, and we provide them with this help. Sometimes they need health care and education itself. So
you're providing a range of services in order to support them.
And women start to feel safe and start to feel that they are and start to feel that they are productive. They have their own space where they can express their own personalities. They have the space where they can express their own self being, and as beings, normal beings. So they feel happy. We work with them through colors
and security.
And
security, as you mentioned, is also a very important point. Mrs. Shimali, the psychological well-being of survivors of war or women refugees is most of the time devastated when these kind of situations occur. How can organizations and NGOs or support groups make sure that women have normal psychological states and ensure that their psychological well-being is maintained?
This is very simple. Usually in refugee camps, international organizations prepare a place that is called a safe place for women and children to come and express themselves, whether by drawing, whether by music, whether by some activities that change their perspective and let them forget what they went through, or let them express what they went through into some activities that are artistic, or they help them just like go out, tell and speak out what they went through. The problem the problem that remains is that some NGOs forget that women have families they have to take care of inside the camp. So what is right now being implemented, for example, I can tell you in the camps for Syrian refugees in Lebanon, is that international organizations with the local communities, with local NGOs, are helping in the same time putting children into some kind of activities and giving other activities in the same time for women. So, for example, like women are going to learn how to cook, how to find food supplies, how to do laundry. At the same time, teenagers are sometimes educated or put into level, for example, in English, in French, in Arabic, and the small children have special activities for them, like music, drawing, or whatever. NGOs, local communities are helping by offering this safe place. They are helping them express themselves. They are offering them a space where they are known. Nothing can go out. What is said in this place stays in this place and remains in this place. The importance is that to speak out, because children and women, especially teenagers and girls, have seen so much, and sometimes they were abused themselves, were abused. They have seen their homes go down and being destroyed. They have seen their fathers go and missing. They have seen their brothers sometimes also get missing or injured. They have seen their mothers struggle into during war, and during how the mother escaped to go to this camp. All those things are remains in the heads of the girls and the teenagers, and it's very important for the local community and the international community, while offering help, offering them special psychological help with social care, with psychologists, just to hear them and to make the safe place special for those women.
Mrs. Shumali, I'd like to go back to the idea of education. And you suggested that most NGOs, or what you mentioned is that most NGOs provide them with training skills. What about normal education, as in schooling, as in normal classes? What happens to women or children or young teenagers when they go into these camps? Do they lose hope of receiving a normal education, and they're forced into achieving or maintaining these skills that replace the normal education that they're supposed to have?
Yes, it's totally true. In fact, usually NGOs try to help and to find teachers. Some NGOs try to find teachers to keep the level of those children and those women and those girls at the same level, and for them not to drop out too many classes and lose their years. But the problem is, or help children also go to some schools near the IDP camps, near the refugee camps in the region. The problem is we don't know if the governments where those refugees are. So when those refugees, if the government can help the schools in the region absorb all those people, all those new children. The problem, for example, we face here in Lebanon is like with 1 million Syrians coming into Lebanon. What we are watching is like and witnessing that many children, and especially girls, are dropping out schools. And this is leading to early marriages. And why they are dropping out schools? First, the school is very far from the camp. It's in another village. So girls are usually who can take those girls to the school and get them back from the school. They can face violence while going out and coming back to this camp. First. Second, the mother has many other duties to do. For example, find other basic needs or necessities for the whole family. So she cannot help her child go back. Sometimes the brothers are missing or they are detained somewhere, so they cannot help. So that is why we have this dropout in schooling. But what some NGOs are offering are other skills, like you just mentioned. For example, like creating chocolate, helping them in some artisanal skills. But this is not enough. It's very, very important that UNICEF and any kind and other international
do
organizations
promote that they receive their
education specialized for refugees, keeping them, sometimes refugees, for example, in Lebanon, coming from Syria, they have English background or just Arabic background, whereas in schools in Lebanon, the program also teaches French. So sometimes the children cannot cope with the program that is given in the Lebanese schools, and so this must be mentioned in all program proposals to those international organizations. The same happened with the Iraqis coming to Lebanon when they were welcomed into the schools here. Some NGOs and some international organizations put into place some special program to help the Iraqi children cope with the Lebanese program. And we have seen some very successful stories, as we have seen also, especially for the girls, some dropping out from school.
Unfortunately. Mrs. Al-Ali, when we're talking about education and empowering young girls, and as Mrs. Shimali mentioned that a lot of girls will drop out, how does your organization and what role do other organizations also have in promoting formal education systems?
Actually, we are working on providing the basic information for women to remove the literacy
So you begin by educating the mothers
yes, the mothers themselves, so they can help their own children at home.
Okay.
This from one side. From the other side, we can provide like the after-school classes that are used to be given, but in a very small and short packages for.
So they're not readily available for everyone,
Yes,
and you don't
no.
have a complete system
No.
yet, because it's not the responsibility of NGOs, correct?
It's the responsibility of the countries themselves, but here the NGOs must cope together and provide like each NGO by itself can provide a part of the whole system for building up education and providing other stuff for refugees.
But going back to the idea that you're educating the mothers first,
Yes.
why have you chosen to do that? Why don't you simply educate the children and disregard the mothers themselves?
Okay, this is a part of the program that we are working with the women themselves. Since we are working with them, the education is a part taking from empowering them in different life skills, and education is one of this.
And what do you mean by life skills? So what are some of the topics that you train them on besides normal education?
Okay, we give them courses about
Do you give
techniques?
cooking? Okay.
Yes, special techniques that are cooking, hairdressing.
So these are
design,
skills.
yes, fashion designs, accessories, how to create accessories, how they can provide food processing and other stuff like that. And
So do you give them like basic survival skills, because they're living in harsh situations?
Yes.
So have you noticed that refugees need to have basic survival skills training?
Yes, we give them the basics, and we teach them how they can use these basics just to produce something, to provide like an economical cycle for them and for their own families.
Mrs. Shimali, we've noticed that the role of women has shifted from being simply housewives into becoming economic providers for their households. What effect does this have on women?
Yes. First, your question is very important. One of the effects of war and armed conflict is, in fact, that the social role of men and women are being changed. When we say about social role, it means that usually the man is the breadwinner of the family, whereas women usually just take care of the household, educate children, take care of cooking and some small tasks. But in fact, when the husband go, for example, or the biggest brothers go to war, women are take the shift and take the role of the husband. You know, production usually everything stops. Work stops during war or armed conflict. Women have to find ways to sustain their family and to give them food, to offer them medicine, to keep basic necessities. So that's why women are directly find out this peace and change and go out of the house to find work. That's why one of the good aspects of armed conflict, if we can have good aspects in armed conflict, is that the social role is changing and women begin more empowered economically, because they find they are in front of a fact they have to sustain their family, because the husband is missing, the brother is missing, women, girls, everybody should work.
So this is a positive side of war.
One of what we can
The
find
very few. One of the very few. Women also act as the protector, and they also act as people who listen to the problems of their children, and no longer are they concerned with themselves, they are concerned with their children and their families. So they're absorbing so much emotions, yet there's a point where we believe that they crack or they can't take it anymore. What do women need to do in order to prevent this from happening?
What I can give you our own experience here in Lebanon, because we faced war and armed conflict, and we are still facing them till now. What women are doing, in fact, they are creating small communities between themselves to speak with each other. The good thing of those small communities is sometimes that women create links between themselves and communicate, and they express themselves. They express the trauma they are living. They express the fear, the anguish they are living. One of the good example I can give you is what happened with the mothers, sisters, and daughters of those missing during who are still missing from the Lebanese war. They created a campaign, a big campaign that now, if, for example, They have created stands and organized a sit-in, a permanent sit-in in front of Esraa, for example, to let international organizations, also the government, remember that their children, their brothers, their sons, their fathers, sometimes now their grandfather are still missing. The good thing that women, to help them, they are helping each other to get out of the trauma they live in the war. They're empowering themselves. They're creating links, and those
self-empowerment.
This is self-empowerment between women, and this is very good on a national level, because sometimes women do speak with other sides of the conflict. That doesn't mean, for example, opposition versus governmental. So women create this link.
Great. What needs to be done in order to minimize the negative effects of war is what we'll be discussing after the break. Please stay tuned.
Pollution and climate change, medicine manipulation, genetically modified food, the destruction of wildlife, and corporate exploitation. These are all part of a new terrorism threatening our future.
Eco-terrorism, global awakening to a world under threat.
Welcome back. Mrs. Al-Ali, Mrs. Shimali was talking about the concept of self-empowerment and how women should empower themselves in order to survive such difficult situations. What needs to be done in terms of creating these organizations or creating these groups, and how can women begin to take these first steps in order to empower themselves and empower others?
In the beginning, when you go to any community or any place, it starts from young ages. You find like someone, there is a leader among the rest. It's by nature, yes. And when we go into these communities for the refugees and the camps, you can find like there is a leader woman here and there, and you can collect them. And as Mrs. Shimali was talking,
do organizations, NGOs,
and yes, organizations and NGOs that work directly with the camps. So as Mrs. Shimali was saying about women empower themselves, women to women talk is much easier for them to express their inner feelings and to speak about their own problems if they got for example sexually abused, or if they are suffering from economic trauma and anything else. So I think that the NGOs and the small associations has to provide like a training.
So specific training for these women,
yes,
who have or who show that they have leadership characteristics.
Yes.
And what happens after that?
These women, after they receive this training, they become like if we can name
role
them
models,
role models, or like paralegals if they got legal education in specific, so they learn how to collect the database. They learn how to provide how they can identify the stream.
So they're equipped with the tools to become a reference for other women.
Yes. So women inside the camps or inside these small communities for the refugees, they know that this is a role model. They can refer to her if they have a problem. So she becomes like a small symbol for
freedom and for safety.
Yes.
Mrs. Shimali, what happens in camps, and as Mrs. Al-Ali talked about earlier, is that the concept of justice disappears. And when a woman has the right to say, no, I don't want to be abused, when she's in a camp, she no longer has this right. Why do forms of social justice disappear in refugee camps and in war areas?
The problem that we face is that in in war areas, the state doesn't exist. The state of law doesn't exist. Women cannot do anything to face this fact unless they can be protected or create some protection means for themselves. As we already talked, they are forced, sexually forced. They are sometimes also abused, even domestically, in their own houses because of fear, because of the stress, or whatever. The problem is that also in refugees camps, women usually have the second role. For example, the men in the camps or remaining men in the camps are those who usually dominate, for example, the aid, when they receive aid from foreign agencies, organizations or international organization or whatever. Usually men are the one who dominate how help is going to be distributed or aid is going to be distributed. Sometimes they ask some let me say it decently, indecent. Sometimes they ask from some indecent favors from the woman, and that is how we can say that women are, even in the camp where they should be safe, they are unsafe.
But
and
why
what
is
we
it?
have seen and what we have witnessed, sorry.
Why is it that men dominate the distribution of aid? Why is it that organizations don't support women or don't provide aids directly to women? Why do they have to go through men themselves?
Yes, because usually even in the refugees camp or what we're witnessing is like the same society that exists outside the camp or that existed in the home country is going to be replicated in the camp. So the patriarchal society that exists usually, for example, in some village that has been displaced in a refugee camp is going to be replicated and recreated in the camp. So we will have the same social roles. The only the diversification that we're witnessing, the only differences we are witnessing is that sometimes when the men are missing from the family,
the woman rises up.
Yes, women are taking some leadership role in their own house. So, for example, they will go out to find some food for their children. They will go to find some medicine to the elder one who remains with them. But usually, the patriarchal society that exists outside the camp or the refugee camp exists also in this in the refugee camp. And usually, international organizations or even local communities cannot go directly against this way or patriarchal behaviors because local communities and even the refugees will refuse them. For example, some women do not accept help, for example, from men coming from international organizations. So this is why usually men dominate the aid distribution.
Mrs. Al-Ali, we're approaching the end of the episode, and before we end, I wanted to ask you about the role of women in peace building. We discussed throughout the episode that women act as economical providers during war situations, and they listen to the problems of their children and their husbands. Yet, what role do they have in acting as peacemakers and ending war?
Women.
Do they have a role, or is it only the man's job to go to negotiations and to represent their countries? Or is it possible that women can have a very important role in creating peace for their country?
Of course, women, they have a very important role in creating peace, but at the beginning they have to learn that they have the right to speak. Because especially they are coming from backgrounds that mostly the man is the head of the house and the dominant, and they need at the beginning to get the awareness and to know that they have the right to speak. They have the right to create peace and negotiate.
But organizations usually focus on providing them with technical skills, as you mentioned. Yeah. But do organizations focus on providing them with these skills? Because it's not only enough to tell them, yes, you can be a peacemaker. How can they be peacemakers?
It starts from different places, not from one place. Because when you start providing the awareness for the women, and they respond with refuse because of their backgrounds. You have just to find different angles and different ways just to enter to them and to gain their trust at the beginning. Thus, you can provide them with the skills and the training techniques, either by awareness sessions or by courses or by workshops, or trying to give them examples for other women who were in this place before.
Mrs. Chimali, most of the time we notice that women who are refugees are unaware of the reasons to why their countries went to war. So how important is it that women are politically aware of what is going on?
It's important for women to be aware of what's going on, for them to have something to say and to say no to violence, no to war, no to armed conflict, and to stop that, and to be able to stress and to change the perspective of each armed conflict. But what is happening usually is like in some patriarchal societies, women do not care about, for example, political or economical problems. So they do not care, and what they care of is just the household. It's very important first to educate women, for them to be able to follow up the political news of their countries, to have something to say, to express themselves even politically, and to say yes or no to war, and yes or no to armed conflict. We can have different opinions without going to war together or kill each other. That is why it's very, very important to educate women, girls, and teenagers. It's very, very important that teenagers, especially, for example, now what is happening with the Syrian refugees, not drop out school. It's very, very important for them to keep fighting for their educational rights, for them first not to get early marriages, what is devastating for girls, not for them not to have babies when they are very, very small. 13 years old is very, very small to have babies. And it's very, very important for them to get education, for them to be able to grow up and be, what your host says, good peace building and good peacemakers.
So do you believe that they can be peacemakers and that women do have a role in acting as peacemakers and in hopefully ending the wars that their countries are going through?
Of course, this is the key role of women. 1325 as a resolution addressed the situation of the effects of war on women. But what we have to continue and to find out is that women have the role and the key role of putting a frame and to say no to war, no to conflict, armed conflict, no to death, no to killing. Women have this very important role to say to create links between communities and between children of different parties. They can help them find a way to communicate peacefully and not with weapons.
Mrs. Al-Ali, what are your final remarks regarding the effects of war on women? And do you believe that women can change the situations that they face, not only in refugee camps, but also after they go back to their countries?
Of course, after experiencing like such hard times they faced, either during the war itself, at their own hometowns or here, and then after they return back, I think that they will know how to merge their experiences and provide their children from facing such experiences maybe later on, and according to what they learned through their communication with each other, their learning outside, and what they face with the outside communities.
So there could be a positive,
yes, they can like find the remedy for themselves from starting from their illness, from
the experience that they went
yes.
through. Mrs. Chimali, what are your final remarks also regarding the negative effects that wars have on women, and what advice do you have for women refugees and for organizations in order to reduce such negative effects?
First, organization must find the key person in each community into the refugee camp for them to talk to. The key person can be also a woman and must be a woman also, because women have special needs that are specific to them. Women must be heard. Secondly, it's very important to mobilize the international community to put a frame and to stop all kinds of sexual violence, rape, all kinds of domestic violence into the camps, and rape and sexual violence during armed conflict and war situation, because this is one of the most devastating thing that can happen not only to a woman, but when what is touching a woman, it will touch the household, it will touch a family, then it will touch a nation. So it's very, very important to put a train and to stop all kinds of sexual violence, because this includes risk, health, not only on a woman. I repeat myself, but it's very important. This has consequences on a nationwide space.
Mrs. Rita Shimali, a specialist and researcher in the field of women's rights, I'd like to thank you so much for your valuable contribution. I'd also like to thank you, Mrs. Safa Al-Ali, the Media and Communication Advisor at Amal Association. Women survivors of war are the glue that holds families and countries together. And perhaps by understanding women and the other side of war, we will have more humility in our discussions of war. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you tune in next week. Take care.